That's what everyone came for. It was the gold and the prosperity and the wealth that it would bring them. So when the Chinese first came here to the northern mines, here in the Trinities, it was to work in the gold fields. Not necessarily to create a community or to build a town. Their hope was they could find as much gold as possible very, very quickly and then return home to Canton and to their families and hopefully bring back, wealth so that they would be more prosperous. But they stayed and they opened up businesses here when this community was started, and eventually they had enough money and the desire to build this temple. Everything here was a visual reminder of their history, their culture, and their faith. It represents over 1,800 years.
So old and in great shape. I mean, the preservation of it is beautiful. All the artifacts inside are lovely. It's amazing that it stayed in such great shape for so many years.
Calgary, Canada. Okay, so what brought you to the Joss House?
Well, we heard about it. We're down visiting relatives.
Okay.
Place up in Trinity Lake. They said there's a temple down here that we should check out if we're going to pass through.
It being a temple as well as a California state park, we're afforded the opportunity to share it not just with the people of Weaverville and not just with the people of California, but people from all over the world come. And it's a place to learn about the history of the Chinese and their contributions to the forming of what California is today, and their influence in the different industries and the areas of the economy that they moved through in California. but then it's also a place for those that may be a Chinese heritage to share the traditions down through the family.
It took him 20 years in order to arrange to grant this to the state for their protection to be part of the state park. And with that, he wanted to make sure it was always open for people to worship, not just Taoist, but people who wanted to go in there and meditate. It was very important for Moon Lee to leave that open for the public. And also he was hoping that the state would also help care for the artifacts, which they have been doing ever since. So that's kind of a little history, how this was established and how it became a state park.
Many different types of state parks that are endangered, and this one, opens a window or a door on a piece of California history that many people know very little about, which is that Chinese Americans were very, very important to the early history of this state in every corner of the state, all over, and that's not really all that well recorded in the history books, and this is a opportunity, I think, for non-Chinese Americans, people who are not of Chinese descent, to also learn a lot more about that part of our history.
And I think when we talk about state parks, beside the most obvious ones and beside funding for repairs and maintenance, it's also the docents. So you talked about Jack Frost.
Yeah.
He's been up there a long time, and he understands, the story and the history and can tell it well. But if all of a sudden people like him are not around, then how does history continue without all those knowledgeable people who really care about the assets? So, so I think that's also important. When we talk about state parks, not only keeping them open and accessible, maintaining them, but also keeping the people who know it the best to make sure that they stay there.
I think it's important to save the Joss House because being a son of two parents who immigrated here from China.
My family basically came here from Hong Kong.
I'm a second-generation American, and my grandparents immigrated here. My grandparents actually met in Temple.
It kind of encapsulates the immigrant experience, or the American dream.
And if there's anything that my parents have taught me, it's to be connected with your roots.
It's also about California history. Chinese people and Chinese culture have had such an impact on California history.
For me, saving Joss House is about identity.
I feel that if we don't save something like this in the future, when we're older and we have children and families, they won't really know as much just by learning about it in schools and not actually being able to go up to a place like the Joss House to see it for themselves.
So in school, you know, we've been taught a lot about Chinese history, about how the Chinese have struggled through times of the gold rush and building the railroads. However, without actually seeing some evidence or seeing the culture and history behind it, I don't think people will appreciate it as much, because it is just then it was just someone telling you.
When I start to decide to have a family and have children, I want them to also be connected at the roots, to teach them what my parents had taught me.
When I decide to start my own family, it's a place where I can bring my children, if my grandparents aren't around, and they can see where they came from, where their ancestors were from, and how they really got here.
And when I visited this, I really understood what Chinese had brought here to California, and I really got this better understanding of myself.
I hate to see the Joss House being defunded, because I visited the Joss House before it was funded by the state, and after I also visited many times. I go up to the fishing every year just about the 1st of October. That's when the salmon runs, the steelhead runs, and I always stay in the same hotel. And you see the Joss House before and after, wonderful transformation. And then, of course, there's other friends of mine went up there from San Francisco, and they were in awe because the exterior was very nice, the interior was identical, no change to it. The same type of the interior, with the Chinese, whether you are Wong or Lee or different surnames, they would donate this Pyongyang on the walls here. See, years ago, $1.50 is still up there. So it brings back major history with the Chinese. I think my recommendation is that if somehow we can have the state continue to fund this Joss House for the benefit, not only for the Chinese, for the history of California, it would be